the work. Taking worrying as a general example. What is worry? Does the work say anything about worrying and how can it be stopped? Worry is a form of identifying. Literally, the word has the meaning of tearing and twisting, or choking and strangling. It was originally connected with the word wring, which is still used in the expression wringing one's hands, one of the outward signs of worry. Remember that every psychological or inner state finds some outer representation via the moving center, that is, it is represented in some particular muscular movements or contractions. You may have noticed that a state of worry is often reflected by a contracted wrinkling of the forehead, twitching, a nervous tic or twisting of the hands. States of joy never have these representations. Negative states, states of worry or fear, anxiety and depression, all represent themselves in the muscles by contraction, flexing, being bowed down, and often by lethargy, a weakness in the muscles, whereas opposite emotional states are reflected into the moving center as expansion. As standing upright, extension of the limbs, relaxing of tension and usually by a feeling of strength. To stop worrying, people who worry and thereby frown too much or pucker up and corrugate their foreheads, clench their fists, almost cease breathing and so on, should begin by relaxing the muscles expressing their emotional state, and freeing the breath. Relaxing in general has behind it, esoterically speaking, the idea of preventing negative states. Negative states are less able to arise when a person is relaxed. That is why it is said that it is necessary to practice relaxing every day, by passing our attention over the body and deliberately relaxing all tense muscles. Control of the emotional center is difficult directly, partly because it works so quickly, 30,000 times more quickly than the formatory part of the intellectual center, so that a person gets worried or negative before they know it. Our emotional center is sometimes compared in the work to an uncontrolled rogue elephant, with two controlled elephants on either side of it. Namely, the intellectual center and the moving center. Wrong emotional states, habitual bad states of worry and irritation must first be noticed as existing. As a rule, people do not see their states but become them. Next, one of the controlled elephants must be used. Consider therefore what it means to use the intellectual center in this regard. This means that we must notice the thoughts going on when we are worrying. We have a certain amount of will over the intellectual center, therefore are able to control thought to a certain extent. By stopping, or not going with, not believing in, not consenting to the thought part of worrying, one elephant, so to speak, is brought alongside the uncontrolled emotional center. The other controllable elephant is the moving center, over which we have will, if we direct attention to it. We can relax muscles and so on. As noted, in guidance offered in the work about relaxing, it is noted first that the small muscles should be relaxed, small muscles of the face, the muscles of expression in particular. This includes our eye muscles, the muscles round the mouth and chin, the tongue and throat, scalp, neck muscles and so on. Worrying is the wrong work of centers. It is always useless. It is a form of inner considering, i.e. of identifying. It is a continual mixing up of negative imagination with a few facts, and so makes only wrong connections in centers. It is a sort of lying, among the many other kinds of lying that go on in us, then mess up the centers. It is always easy to worry as it gives a relief, and is as it were, a form of justifying oneself. It is close to self-pity and violence. Worrying is not thinking. The mind is driven by the worry, by the emotional state, and therefore obscured. Attention to anything always helps, for directed attention puts us into more conscious parts of centers. Worrying is not thinking of others. It is not external considering. It is mixed up with oneself, and this takes a long time to observe distinctly. In learning how to live from the work point of view, so that we live more consciously in life, or live in the work in life. Not just in life without anything. Between us and life, worrying is one of the things that show us something about ourselves, if we notice it uncritically and over a long enough period. However, one must not assume that the opposite of worrying is indifference. You can, and should feel anxiety about another person in danger, a mixture of hope and fear, but worrying is quite something else, for then the imagination enters into it, becoming a habit, just as so many other negative states do. People even imagine they are better than others by having worries, and feel merit in worrying. They think it is right to worry about everything, about the past and the future, about themselves, about others, and so on. This is simply nothing but a serious negative illness which is difficult to cure, for once a person has become nothing but an inverted machine for worrying, all sorts of wrong connections have been established and everything works in the wrong way. Since the only thing they enjoy is worrying, to deprive them of this, were it possible, would be to destroy their chief interest. In this regard, remember one of the work sayings, that we are asked above all to do one thing, to give up our particular form of suffering. This sounds easy at first, so try it. The reason why it is so difficult is because to do so is to destroy whole systems of I's in ourselves that enjoy making us suffer, and that we think we are. They mold our self-image into long-suffering. To ask ourselves what worrying is? It is a form of identifying, which means that it brings about a continual loss of force. People who worry a great deal are exhausted and drain themselves of force. Notice yourself when you are worrying and you will see that it really is like tearing and twisting or strangling oneself inside, corresponding with the outer muscular movements which have already been described. There is no center of gravity. There is no direction, no clear aim, everything is in disorder, everything is, as it were, running about in oneself in all directions. It is as if all the different I's in oneself got up and rushed about wringing their hands and saying anything that the negative imagination, which dominates the scene, suggests to them. It cannot be said, however, that it is possible never to worry. There are situations, especially today, where it is well nigh impossible to stop it at times. What are referred to here are habitual tendencies, to worry about everything and take every event as a source of worry. To formulate clearly what one is going to do, to have some direction, helps to prevent this state of disorder, which is a form of internal considering, and is not external considering. Internal considering is always mechanical. External considering is always conscious. It is consciously putting yourself in another person's position, and since this requires directed attention, it takes you out of worrying. If you notice, you will see that little forms of worrying start very early in the morning. It is therefore a good thing and worth doing, to work on oneself in the early morning, before descending into life and duty. A little conscious work at that time, noticing the small beginnings of worrying or negative thoughts or self-pity, and saying no to them. Lifting oneself out of them and not taking them as you, all this work of non-identifying with certain machines, certain I's in the early morning, can alter our entire day. To this of course belongs the idea of cancelling debts, letting go of all inner accounts, if possible. Then something fresh and new begins our day, and the staleness of life is prevented, which is really the staleness of oneself always reacting in the same way to everything. Habitually having the same views, taking others in the same way and so on. Work on the self can have marvelous results, if we remember that we are in life in the work, and not in life without anything between us and it. The work is developed to transform our relationship with life. All the practical things said in it have this objective, which is to work on oneself. To be in the work in life, and not in life. What is our tasking? Why are we down here? What is it that we have to change? What is it that we have to learn about ourselves, this thing we take for granted, this vessel that is our apparatus for living? Does it yield the outcome that we desire? Yourself, your personality, is the apparatus you are using for living life. It is good to begin to see that your way of taking life becomes your life, and that you can begin to work on your way of taking it, which means working on yourself and your mechanical reactions to all that happens. For your mechanical reactions to life are yourself, and that makes your unhappiness and happiness. This thing called yourself, is the apparatus for living the life that you have made, and which has been made in you by thousands of forgotten causes. This is the thing we will out every morning to face the day with. And this is what the work speaks of in all its stages, the part that we can work upon and alter. Try to think that it is not life that you can change, but yourself in your reaction to life. This is where the first idea of what it means to work on oneself lies. Once you see the idea, then whatever the conditions of life, you have a power in your grasp whose value is beyond price. You have begun to grasp the pearl, to see what life on earth really means. For a long time we absorb every kind of negative emotion, identifying with it and taking it as ourselves, as necessary, as true, and try to work on it once it has formed itself. But the time comes when it cannot form itself. The effect of not going with some mechanical reaction in yourself and feeling you are free in respect of it is quite magical. You will notice what happens. It is interesting, but a matter of your own experience. You should begin to understand that the work is not mere dull labor. It is self-liberating through a peculiar inner effort, which is called work on oneself.